There's another effort to try to eliminate one of the state's main sources of revenue, the personal income tax. And this one would also erase what had been the state's chief business tax, the commercial activity tax. But the current state budget went a long way toward that, cutting the CAT for businesses that have taxable receipts of under $3 million, which means only about 10% of Ohio businesses pay the CAT now. All told, based on current numbers, this will be a cut of around $13 billion. There are two bills. The House version repeals the CAT and phases out the income tax by 2028. The Senate version would erase it 2 years earlier. I talked to one of the joint sponsors of the House version, freshman Republican Representative Adam Matthews. So let's talk about the personal income tax elimination and the commercial activity tax elimination you want to do. The personal income tax brought in about $10.8 billion in fiscal year 2023. The commercial activity tax brought in $2.1 billion in fiscal year 2023. How in the world can the state function without nearly $13 billion when the state is estimated to spend $86 billion in fiscal year 2024? I mean, that's 15% of the budget. I know you're talking about a phase-in, but really, this is a huge chunk.
Sure. We have seen every time that we have moved off from the peak that we had in 1984 of 9 income tax brackets and a peak of 9.5% at the highest, we've been cutting the state income tax. And every time that we've cut the income tax, we've had actually an increase of revenue. Because when you have more economic activity coming into the state or staying in the state and growing here, whether that's sales tax or income tax, you have an increase of revenue. And we've seen sales tax continue to increase and keeping it at a consistent rate, and that increase is continuing as we bring in the intels, as we bring in that type of growth.
Is there, though, a point where it will fall apart? I mean, is there a point that you reach where you won't get that revenue back?
Sure. So we have seen other states. We've looked at a great model is North Carolina, who has been able to cut taxes and balance their budget in a way that's responsible. And we're going to be looking at going out to the community, going out to the committee process, on both hearing from my learned colleagues as well as commissioners, city councilmen, small businessmen's families on what looks like that's important and where can we make sure that Ohio is providing the services that is needed to protect the most vulnerable, protect the crucial features, but also keep more money in everyone's pockets. One
of the big questions, obviously, that people want to ask is what are you going to do without this money in terms of specific spending cuts? And the biggest areas of the budget for general revenue are K through 12 education, about 41% of the budget, Medicaid spending, the state's share, 19%, higher ed, 10%, health and human services, 9%, corrections, 8%. Where do you cut?
Sure. And so looking at these discussions, Medicaid doesn't make sense. So we're not looking at that to try to get there. And
meaning you won't cut Medicaid.
Correct. And so we are making sure that we go through and responsibly deal with all of our expenditures, whether we're cutting taxes or not. Every time that we have a budget, we want to make sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And looking at other states, on a per capita spend, we are way out of line of states like Florida, of states like Texas. And whether and how we get there is going to be a conversation that we have in committee and in the town halls that we're going to be doing around the state.
So you haven't identified any specific areas other than to say you don't want to touch Medicaid?
Correct.
So is there a possibility that taxes are going to have to be raised to compensate it? Because when we saw former Governor John Kasich cut the income tax, there was a corresponding, well, maybe not a corresponding, but an increase in the state sales tax.
Sure. Not to say, I hear your question. And we're going to go to the community and town halls to see what's important. We are not planning on having those types of increases. The introduction of the bills is simply the phase-in rate of the income tax. The next part is that communication of what that looks like to make sure that we balance this budget.
Now, critics of the current tax system will say it's already unequal and that cutting taxes, income taxes for those who are paying them, which are people making a little over $26,000 a year, will just make them richer. And that's been a criticism about the Laffer curve, which you've referenced as a big part of what you're doing here, that it just makes the rich richer and it doesn't help people who are at the lower end of the scale.
Sure. Ohio already does a great job, and we want to continue protecting those most vulnerable, those on the margins. Ohio, on their sales tax, we don't tax food. We don't tax diapers and maternal care. And the type of conversations we're coming, the other co-sponsors and I, joint sponsors and I, we're not looking at messing with that to make sure that those that most need that type of help, we're not taxing them out of their livelihood. And when we allow those that are higher, that are doing better, to reinvest in Ohio, then they're the ones that then can provide jobs and have people have that type of dignity, have that type of economic foothold to get going themselves. And hopefully, by increasing those that want to build businesses, want to grow here, want to grow families, and invest in Ohio, we can get people off of needing the state to step in and help them get to a place where they can have that type of pride in the work and the family that they're building here in the next generation in Ohio.
One example that's often pointed to is Kansas, which you have referenced in your conversations about this. In Kansas, income taxes were cut dramatically in 2012. The economy did not grow faster than in other states. And Republicans who controlled the legislature came back and raised taxes and then even overrode Governor Sam Brownback's veto of that. How do you avoid that exact situation, which would be a disaster not only for Ohio, but also for Republicans who want to see this happen?
Correct, which is why we're taking a deliberative process on this. Senator Huffman, Senator Lang, and Rep. Lampton have been here a very long time. I've been working on the income tax through House Bill 1, and that's why we're not doing a quick next budget, we're cutting the income tax. This is a conversation that we're going to be having to set a goal for 6 years out so that we can see how the economy moves, how the industries change. If you would have said 15 years ago that semiconductors would have been the next hot item for sales, that would have been an odd thing to pitch on. And now we see Intel coming, we have Honda coming, we have many others, and seeing where Ohio is so that we can adjust and get a plan that works for all Ohioans.
One of your joint sponsors, Senator George Lang, or he's sponsoring the Senate version of the bill, said that his goal would be, and a goal that can be measured is, I think it was $1 trillion in revenue increase, I believe, and then 16 members of Congress. Well, Ohio lost a member of Congress after the Kasich tax cuts. So how can you guarantee that you're going to get another member of Congress back?
Sure. Since 1971, when the income tax was instituted, we have lost congressional delegation every single time. And it's competing with others, even in our geography. You have Indiana that's doing better with a better business system. Their weather is the same as ours. And you have a great test case with Arizona and New Mexico. Arizona's growing and New Mexico isn't. And by having a business-friendly environment in that relation is how we need to be there. And by getting to a 0% income tax, we can be a beacon of economic liberty so that those know shorthand. You and I, when we're talking here, we know very quickly, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, those are 0% income tax states. That is a way that we can communicate that Ohio is open for business for families to come and grow here.
A lot of these states that are 0% income tax states have something else, though. They have tourism, they have energy, they have something else that helps replace that lost revenue.
Correct, and I think we have a great model of having both tourism and energy.
That much, you think, to come up with $13 billion?
We can do a lot for that direction, and as Senator Lang said, we have the greatest resource of natural gas under us in the country, and hopefully we unleash that. And then why I'm very partial to Kings Island, and I hope that can help a little bit as well. And we kept the Cincinnati open.
And finally, I mean, is there real evidence that tax cuts spur economic growth? Because there certainly appears to not be that evidence there.
Sure. Every time that we've had tax cuts, and you've seen that when you have tax increases, economic activity goes down. In Ohio, we've had tax cuts and our revenue comes up, showing the increase of economic activity. Sales tax goes up even when you have keeping the same rate, which means economic activity comes up. So when we do cut taxes, economic activity does grow. And we have businesses, large and small, point to the complex tax regime we have in Ohio on strangling them as they're trying to grow and build their American dream here.
Two of the biggest tax states, though, have some of the biggest economies, New York and California. So doesn't that kind of gum up against what you're trying to say here?
New York is looking at losing 5 congressional seats next time because of the population shift. Both of those are losing population, and you can continue on a momentum for a long time. And California and New York did a lot, but it seems like they may be killing their golden goose.
Matthews was also the sponsor of last year's House Bill 1, a top priority bill for Speaker Jason Stephens. That bill would create a flat income tax of 2.75% and make some major property tax changes, estimated to bring a $929 million increase in property taxes on homeowners and agricultural property owners, and a $538 million loss to schools and local governments. House Bill 1 has not moved in committee since April of last year.